everybody wants to be an Olympian, and now if you could do sevens through the Olympics, we're going to end up with a lot more people trying to join the sport. Guys that are from the NFL or from track and field.
Like, what do you think needs to happen for the game to really take off in the US?
Yeah, the speed at which the game will grow, that will change everything.
Hello and welcome back to the Much Ado About Rugby podcast, your weekly rugby podcast where we chat about everything rugby. And today we have another special guest. We have Hans from the US. How are you doing, Hans?
I'm well. Thank you for having me on.
Thank you for joining us. So Hans is here for another episode of our Rugby Around the World series, where we talk to people around the world about their rugby experiences in their country. And today we're going to be talking to Hans from America. So America actually has the largest number of fans in the world for rugby at 30 million. A little fun fact to start you off. And Hans has been playing rugby for a long time. I mean, Hans, do you want to speak very quickly about your rugby experience so far?
Sure. It started in high school. I was maybe a little undersized for football. I was good at wrestling. Rugby ended up being that like perfect medium. And so I started playing when I was like 15, ended up going to college and, getting a scholarship to play in college in the US. And, from that point, I ended up playing club now. Here we are.
Awesome. Well, to start us off, we're going to have a little bit of an icebreaker quiz. So I hope you've been doing your research on US rugby. And the two competitors are going to be Mal and you, Hans. So big stakes.
1v1.
1v1. Don't get embarrassed, Hans. Come on, you've got to beat Mal with your rugby knowledge. So how do we want to do this? We want to have buzzers, don't we?
Yeah, do a buzzer. So Hans, what do you want your buzzer noise to be?
You know what surprised me? I just got to figure out how I do it.
Well, just say it could be. I'll go for bong. That can be my bong. Bong will be mine. Yeah, bong.
Hans,
I'll
you
go
can
ding.
Go ding. Okay, cool. Yeah. All right. So essentially, there's going to be three questions. Wait, two of them are buzzer, and one of them is who can get the nearest to. So are you guys ready for your first question in the buzzer round? This is all extremely tense. So first question is, who is the highest scoring American sevens player?
Bong.
Malachi.
Perry Baker.
That's actually incorrect. Hans.
I'm guessing it's a guy that's played for a while. Is it Madison Hughes?
No, it's not Madison Hughes. It's actually Colin Isles. It's the top scorer.
I was going to go for him, but then I was like, I thought it was too
Guys, come on, this is poor. I was expecting one of you to get it.
I figured the conversions, but now I get it's seven. So
okay, the second one is I fully expect Hans to get this. Okay, you guys ready?
Yeah.
Who are the current MLR defending champions?
Is it the Seattle one?
Yeah, what's the full name?
Oh yeah, well. If he doesn't,
I don't know what the full name is.
It's Seattle Seawolves.
Oh,
I couldn't remember if it was his Legion of Seawolves, but it's Seattle Seawolves.
Yeah. Well, to be fair, there was no championship last year because of COVID, so you could argue there are no defending champions. I think we'll halve that point, to be fair, because you didn't even know their name, so fair enough.
Yeah.
Okay, so for this final question, we're going to do a who's closer to it. So it's a number question. I'd like you both to submit an answer. I think you can private message me on chat on Zoom, and then we'll see who's closer. And this is the deciding question as to who's going to win the USA Rugby Quiz of the year on Much Ado About Rugby. All right, you guys ready? So the question is, how many points did USA score in the 2020 World Rugby Sevens series? So Malachi said 2,000 points. That's quite a lot of points.
Is that way too many?
Quite a lot. And Hans went with 888.
Okay.
I
So
think we
quite
know
a
who's
big
won.
difference.
I think we know who's won this one. So the actual answer was 632.
Oh,
So
what?
congratulations, Hans. You are the
No.
USA World Rugby Quiz winner. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Yeah, well done, Hans.
Okay, awesome. So that was just our little icebreaker quiz. And the first thing we really want to chat with you about in detail is sevens. So obviously we just finished on that amazing fact about the 2020 series. But we want to know, in your opinion, what is the one thing that has led to the rise of sevens in the USA?
I think it's the game itself, as opposed to the union. It's a lot less strategic and a lot more just reacting and being athletic. And we have plenty of that in America. Just
Do you think?
judging. Go ahead.
But just building on like the athleticism, do you think, because obviously you had Carlinal sprinters and stuff, do you think that's been a big impact? Like other people, like more, it's just like the whole athletic aspect of it. Do you think it's that's more attractive than it's rather than associating with the game of rugby itself, it's more associated being like an athlete of an athlete in sevens?
I don't think it's necessarily that. I think it's a lot of the guys that come through. So I like when I play on the Summer Sevens series, you play against other big clubs that are in the elite category for that summer tournaments. And every year you hit a couple of developmental academies that are filled with guys that couldn't quite make it in the NFL. And you're lined up and you have a center in front of you that's 6'4", 240, and runs faster than anybody you've ever seen. And it's a nightmare to deal with. But they don't have the rugby IQ. They don't know what to look for. But in sevens, if you can run real fast and you're hard to tackle, you'll be okay.
Yeah, definitely. And do you think that, like, I don't know, because me and Maliki were discussing it, and I think we wanted to ask you about what types of players like Carlinals and Perry Baker, and what kind of impact they have on sevens in particular in the US. Like, are they sort of like heralded? Like, what is the attitude towards a national sevens team? Is it very sort of everyone's sort of looking at that, or is it more of a community sense?
I mean, everybody likes that the US is doing so well. I think the players that are the players' favorites are like Maka Anufe, guys that have the skill and the class. Perry Baker, obviously, the things that he does, the highlight reels are unbelievable.
Yeah. Actually ridiculous, his highlight reels.
Yeah.
He steps out of situations he just shouldn't. Because there's that, I remember watching like one particular I think he tried scoring, literally ran the entire pitch from his own like in goal area.
Yeah, he's stuck in the corner.
Yeah.
With, like steps, like so fast, they just gassed it all the way. That's insane.
Actually outrageous.
But
like,
Hans, do you think the Olympics, success? Because obviously the US, they're literally like the top like few teams in sevens. Do you think the Olympic success is linked to or the success that they could get with the Olympics is causing like the US to push sevens a bit more than maybe like rugby union?
Definitely. I think that being an Olympian is something that every child in America is dreaming of, basically. I mean, I'm sure it's the same in Britain, but everybody wants to be an Olympian. And now if you could do sevens through the Olympics, we're going to end up with a lot more people trying to join the sport. Guys that are from the NFL or from track and field, that maybe were fringe athletes there, but given their really unique talents and athleticism, can make an impact for the US game.
Yeah, because it's really interesting, because we had another Rugby Around the World episode with someone from China, and I feel like they're like similar to the US in a way, but just like way further back, because they're just developing their Olympics program for
Mhm.
sevens, and we know what China are like. They just absolutely go for it with the Olympics. So no, it's really interesting how it's sort of very much like focused. And the next thing I wanted to ask was like, how would one get into rugby in the US? Because in the UK, we have like grassroots clubs, and in particular in sevens, like are there sevens hotspots in the US? Like where are the main leagues? Are they very national or state-wise? Like how does that even work?
Yeah, so the sevens clubs are ran through the same union clubs. So it's a 15th team has a sevens team in the off season that all the backs basically join in. Um, and then you pull from, college teams, guys that are still in the area. Um, the way that you kind of get into rugby, some areas in the country have high school teams. Um, so
Who
you
are the
might
kind of people
start.
who are playing rugby at high school? Because obviously
Uh,
you've got
yeah.
such big competition from other sports, though, like in
Mhm.
America.
Yeah, so a lot of guys that just aren't doing a spring sport, because if you're in a big enough high school, typically you only do one sport if you want to be really good at it. But then, you end up with a lot of guys, especially their junior, senior year, that realize, oh, I'm not going to get a Division 1 football scholarship, and so they try rugby.
Mm.
And if it's not that, then you get guys who played high school football or high school wrestling or any number of sport, and they just want to have a community and kind of an event that they can go to each week and work on. And
So
rugby's a lot of fun. So
would you say rugby is popular in America? Or would you say it's like quite like a niche sport that people kind of like play as like a second hand kind of thing?
yeah, if you're talking high school, it's definitely everybody's. If you're playing rugby, it's usually your second sport or third.
Mm.
And then if you're, as far as like the general population, it is kind of more on the back burner. I think it's growing, but it's not football, it's not basketball,
Yeah.
it's not baseball. It's more on the level of like a lacrosse, where
Okay.
the
That's
people
a good
who like it
comparison.
love it, and they live and breathe it. But it it's not like millions of people are tuning in to watch
Yeah.
every game.
Yeah.
Then with college rugby, is that still like what is it still like you get like people who mostly played at high school or just like like not doing so good in American football or something and transferring over to rugby as a and then succeeding in that?
It depends what level you look at, because you can split college rugby into some tiers. You have clubs at the big state schools that they don't have a funded program, because it's not part of their selected list of sports that they've had forever. So those, it's just guys that used to play football and want to have something to do. Um, Sometimes they play some pretty good rugby, other times not so much.
Yeah.
And then you have varsity programs, that go out and find, good high school rugby players, guys that have dropped out of a big football program or weren't getting a lot of playing time at football program. And then when you look at the top teams, they actually supplement their rosters with a lot of foreign-born players.
Mm.
Okay. So
Cool.
is it is it attracting, do they go abroad and actually offer them scholarships to come to America, or are they already like living in America when you say foreign born?
Nope, they go over there and they
Oh,
get
okay.
them. Yeah,
Yeah, that's cool.
you have your recruiters go on trips to South Africa and pick out a couple schoolboys and bring them over, and that's how you get your 8 man. That's how you get your fly half.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
What do you personally think about that? Like as an American, like do you think it's a like positive thing? Because I know in a lot of like pro leagues, that kind of thing is seen as very like negative, just in
Mhm.
the sense of building up your own rugby. And do you think like the college systems are doing it out of interest for their own results rather than like rugby as a growing sport in the US?
Yeah. So those top 10 teams in the US are really the only ones that do the foreign recruitment, and it's definitely out of a need for competition. Now, whether it's a positive or negative, I think it brings the rugby standard up. Like when I was a freshman, I came in and I was actually quite shit. That there's no way around it. But I spent every single day we'd have practice for 2 hours, weights for one, and then you'd go into the gym after you've eaten dinner, and you work on passing for an hour or two, and every single day. And 2 years later, after working with the guys that were 20, 21, 22 years old that were from South Africa, eventually you get to the point where you do have skills that you can play at the top level.
Yeah, yeah.
So,
Because I guess like the main difference would be because like in the UK, from like our background, like you'd be given like I feel like the basic skills would be very, very good. I don't know what your thoughts are, Mal, about that. Because like for us, like we'll be passing a rugby ball at school, like since we're like super young, because it's the main sport that we play.
Yeah,
But
I
then
think
like
there's a bit in England. There's a big divide between like rugby, which is more like grammar and publics and more grammar and private schools, and then soccer or football as we call it is more is more associated with like the public schools, if that's the right
mhm.
term, because
Yeah.
I don't know, it's just the way it is. So you get a lot of, but you do get a lot of people playing who go to the public schools who are playing at clubs as well, but it's mostly people who already go to private schools. It's big in that area.
yeah, yeah. I just find it interesting how like it's like the basic skill. It's the skills that you're trying to really build up, like passing so much like per
Mhm.
day. But like the South Africans that come over are probably just like, yeah, whatever. I've been
Yeah,
passing rugby ball
yeah.
since I could walk.
And there's definitely just like a really steep curve where once you have that foundation, eventually, I'd say maybe like a year or two in, the passing wasn't an issue, tackling not an issue, but then you start to pick up the finer skills, knowing how to read and anticipate, when somebody's coming into space, or
Yeah,
if
having
space is
actual rugby
opening.
brain.
Mm,
Yeah, once that starts to build in, that's really where those South African players have the advantage, is that the game isn't as fast to them. They see what's happening,
Mm.
and it takes you 3 years of a lot of hard work and dedication to get close to what they're seeing.
mm.
um,
Yeah. So
I think any American flanker that you see, he's not getting in on breakdowns, and not until he's a senior or junior in college, that's for sure.
So, with playing in at college rugby yourself, what would you say like the standard of rugby is actually like in terms of the both the playing standard and also the coaching standard?
Mhm. So those state schools, they have coaches that are volunteering, so they might have two coaches that volunteer and they practice twice, 3 times a week. But the varsity programs, they will have you know 3 coaches, a physio, and we're practicing 5 times a week. um, those guys are on salary, and you get some that are very, very good, and then sometimes it can slip through the cracks, because facts are the hiring managers don't really know how to identify who really knows what they're talking about, and
Mm.
the turnover can be pretty bad too. I had 3 different coaches in college, three
Oh,
different head
really?
coaches during
Mm.
5 years. And the one that was there for 3 years in the middle, I'm not going to say his name, but I mean, he didn't know anything about what he was doing. I mean, we'd be laughing the whole
Yeah.
time and just be like, well, I guess this season's fucked.
So it's kind of sounds like there's a bit of like a lack of coaching in America, to be honest.
Yeah, but there are some the programs that you see that win every year. They have good coaches.
Oh, okay. So it
Their
kind of
their
depends
coaches
on
are
school to
legitimate.
school.
Yeah. So we were in the same conference as a college called Life University, which is a private school, and they had all these great ties to South Africa, and half their squad was foreign players, and they were all real good. Their coaches had ties to the USA team, and they were, holding the USA like tracking camps for emerging players. Those guys, like, life has won literally more than 50% of all the college, championships in the last 20 years.
Really? So how
Yeah,
does it
so
work? Like,
it's
sorry, just I'm probably being completely like obnoxious, but like, what is like a varsity program? Like, how does that actually work in the US?
yeah. So you have, whatever funding you have, and so you bring in the players that are good. You take local talent, and you get like every freshman class was like 20 kids, and then half of them would leave the next year because they weren't cut out for it, or it was too hard, or they just clearly weren't going to get a spot. But then it whittles it down, and by the end of it, you get that 20 is down to 6, and they're good players by the time they're a senior.
Okay.
With bigger programs like a Life or Lindenwood, those guys, they have a squad of nothing but players that actually know how to play, and they have they're 3 deep on their sides, so they have like 90 guys in the program. And
Wow.
those teams are, like, the thing about it is they're better funded, so they can afford that. And over the course of the season, we were in their conference, we were able to beat them one off, but by the end of the season, 3 of our better guys get injured. Now there's no chance.
Wow. Yeah.
I think one last thing that covering the college aspect of rugby is obviously the social side of it is massive for the UK, and obviously in America the drinking age is 21, isn't it? So
This is what we really want to know.
yeah, this is actually we're
There
actually
it
quite
is.
interested. What is it actually like? Because like even like obviously it's 18 in England, but obviously people are drinking much before that. With like clubs or their school team or whatever. So what is it like at college with the 21 drinking age?
So if you're part of a state school, you're drinking immediately. It's a club, and those freshmen, they'll drink till they pass out every weekend for the first 2 years. It's a hot mess, but it's fun. The varsity programs, guys that don't follow the rules will get in trouble and sometimes get kicked out of the program.
It's a lot more serious.
Yeah, but
They're not allowed to.
we do still, have a good time. It's just, there's rules like the team. If you're on the team, you only drink on a Saturday after a game, and even if you are underage, you might still find yourself at a party and drinking and having a good time, but there's no just you don't let the coaches, it's kind of don't ask, don't tell that. And if you do get caught, maybe like campus security busts you or something, and then it's like the coach has his hands are tied. You're suspended for 2 weeks, no games for 2 weeks. That's just how it is.
Do you have is it big like party celebrations after every game then, really?
Yeah. Massive. Yeah, I mean, I could tell you, a million stories, but it's we'd go as hard as possible. And the good thing about it is, the colleges that have rugby programs are private schools, and so there's a lot of the people who are on campus are basically all athletes. So you would just like invite, another team. So for the longest time, every party that we had for like 3 seasons was always at the cheerleader's house, and it was just the cheer team and the rugby team. That was what it was.
That's pretty cool, actually. Having like linking up the two like societies, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
Moving on to the ML, was there anything else you wanted to touch on, Mackie?
No, not really.
No, I mean, go ahead.
Else. No, just the only thing is like people in the UK, they sometimes say the Americans don't really pass very hard. So do you want to send a message out to all those people in the UK listening about that?
Yeah, they're probably just watching the guys that are from the state schools. If you play with a guy that was a varsity member and had to beat out 10 other guys to get into his position, then those guys, you wouldn't say that.
Because in the UK, like literally, even at the top tier of university rugby, which is like really, really high tier, like even like the elite players are basically alcoholics.
Yeah.
They just get absolutely smashed every week, which is quite insane. Like most
Part of the culture though, isn't it?
yeah, like in the UK, there's this one guy, I don't know if you know, called Don Brandt, who now plays for the Harlequins. He played at university in the UK, and he was absolutely huge because he basically drunk loads and was a uni student. As soon as he went to Harlequins, he lost like literally stones in like the first few months because he had so much uni weight from drinking so much.
Shall we move on to MLR then? I think the first question I'm particularly interested in is, again, crossing over with NFL and basketball, is there's the whole draft system in those sports, but is there in rugby, is there a draft kind of system yet? Or is it kind of small, or is it more just like, because in the UK we have academies where you get picked up by the academy and then you'll work through the ranks there and then you'll get selected for the first team. But how does it work with the MLR?
Yeah, so they do have obviously MLR is pretty new, so they're adding stuff every year. But they do have a draft system where you declare your eligibility, and then if you're good enough, they've already kind of looked at your film and they have this draft. Now, whether those guys play, I don't know. They almost all ended up on the developmental side for the MLR teams, with a couple exceptions of guys that were really quality players and ended up getting some looks on the first side. Most of those guys, they're probably never gonna actually play in the MLR.
So what's the main way that the MLR teams actually like recruit their players, I guess you could say?
They pull from the top tier club for men, so non-professional, but these a lot of these guys that really take it seriously, some of those guys filtered through. They pull from teams that are like the Uruguayan national side. I think a bunch of those guys got contracts. For the Canadian teams, I know they're starting one in Vancouver, but they have one in Toronto. The Arrows, they're basically all just the Canadian national side. So I mean, I guess that's kind of like central contracting, right? That's like a thing you guys talk about.
Yeah.
So
that's interesting. Wait, so is there central contracting in the US?
No, but I think the Canadian sides do that. But the US sides are just, get as many guys off like a developmental team from the Prem or from, like a bunch of Irish guys show up, and then, supplemented with aging stars that are done. They've already taken their, money contract in France, and now they're going to come over and get another one for.
Yeah, because you've got like Nonu's over. I think Chris Robshaw, he got a contract recently as well.
Yep.
That kind of reminds me of like the MLS in soccer, with like how you get a bit of like the players who are getting on a bit. But I don't know, do you think that's a good or a bad thing if it's kind of going that way, or would you prefer to see like?
I think it's good ultimately. You get a guy like the Beast is I can't pronounce his name, but you know who I'm talking about, the South African prop.
Yeah.
He signed with the Washington DC franchise, and I basically can guarantee that he's just like the scrum coach. But he'll play games, but he's basically there to coach and to drum up attention for
quite
fans.
Interesting. So they're signing him as a player, but also hoping that he'll like be able to actually improve the squad's total skills as well. That's really interesting.
Yeah,
actually.
like, and some of them work out and some of them don't. New York, Rooney has Ben Foden, and he's done good things with their program. But then you had like that New York team signed Bastro, and I mean, he was a hot mess. If you watched any of the games, I mean, he never had any line speed on defense. He never tried to make tackles. Anytime that he caught the ball, he just like took it at a standstill and like did nothing. You know, he was 40 pounds overweight, and they had to move him to 8-man.
Do you,
It
do
was-
you think maybe these
That's
players maybe take a like not a great like they come with not a great mindset as thinking it's maybe a step down, like because obviously it's
Mhm.
an upcoming league. They might. Do you think that could affect their whole like the Bastro situation you just explained?
Definitely. I think it's a culture shock for some guys, especially the French guys, that you know, they show up and maybe, you know, like especially for like New York, the real estate's too expensive. They don't have good practice facilities. But I know that, you know, if you go to like New Orleans, you know, their practice facilities are, you know, the same as like any, you know, pro side, I guess. Um, so it depends on what team you go to. It depends on, you know, what culture you're coming from. Don't, you know, you can't expect to walk down the street and have everybody know your name. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's just not what it is.
Yeah, to
Uh,
be fair, but I think Bastro always had a pretty appalling attitude.
Yeah.
Like even when he played in France, he just like punched people and stuff, and he's
Yeah.
definitely overweight.
yeah.
No, that's interesting. It's I find it interesting how like the college system just isn't really isn't like the main route in, like compared with other US sports. Obviously, we know
Yeah.
like NFL.
It's because the college system is still a little bit behind. You know, obviously the high school, there's not a big enough population to bring guys in from high school and really have top tier teams. So you have to go for it. Same thing with the MLR. You could pull all the best college players, but you're going to need to get guys from overseas who have that, you know, the ability to see the game at a faster speed and react better. And they've just been playing the game for much longer at a higher level.
Yeah.
Yeah. No. Then who are the kind of people who are watching US rugby and MLR and all, like because it's
Mhm.
obviously as Mackie said at the beginning, there's a lot of fans, but who are these fans who are watching it?
Anybody that's you know, dedicated club man, really. I mean,
So
if
it's
you
mostly
like
people
rugby,
already involved in rugby
yeah,
themselves.
yeah.
Okay.
And I'm sure that locally there's guys that kind of check it out because it's a local sport, and you know, people have community pride in the US. You know, you like the city that you're from, you know, most of the time anyways. Um, but the majority of games that are watched for rugby, in my experience, people watch all the internationals if you like rugby, and if you really like rugby, you'll watch, you know, the Prem,
Yeah.
and
What leagues
Super
do
Rugby
you
anyways.
what kind of rugby do you watch yourself?
So I watch a lot of Premiership games. You know, lately, like I like watching the Wasp. I
Boss.
don't. It took me a while to get into it, where I didn't like the slow, low scoring games because I was used to watching Super Rugby. But
Yeah.
now
Super
I
Rugby's so
guess
good.
I'm appreciating it more and more as I get into it, and I learn more about, like, you know, the different
It's
players, and I can identify who's on the pitch. You know.
it's interesting how like the different leagues have like almost the whole league has a different like style of play. Like, as you're saying, the Super Rugby.
Mhm.
What would you describe the MLR style of play as? Would you say it's more towards the Premiership or more towards like Super Rugby?
Um, it'd be hard to compare.
Yeah.
You basically have the stars that just try and run through, and most of the time they can make somebody miss. And
Mm.
you know, so in that way, there's a lot of fast offense. You know, a lot of breaks that finish, like Super Rugby, but you get long stretches of the game where the structure is very simple, and they're just trying to get consistency down, and then it kind of looks like Welsh rugby almost, where it's very, you know, slow. I mean, not Scarlets, but
Boring,
you know,
boring.
just
I think
yeah,
boring is what he's looking for. Welsh
yeah,
rugby definition.
yeah.
Awesome.
Okay.
And then what I think we'll wrap up on this final note. Where do you see US rugby in general going across like both MLR, college, sevens, everything? Where do you
Mhm.
think it's going in the next like five,
Uh,
10 years?
I think in 10 years it's going to be a lot better. There's definitely a lot more effort that's being put into, you know, the coaching side and maintaining uh, the quality. people are using analytics better. Like at practices, you now have little GPS bibs that make sure that your heart rate's at a right spot and that you're covering enough ground, spending enough time accelerating, that kind of thing. Coaches, I mean, every good team has like an actual structure now that you can see, and that's only going to get better. Mostly just using a 1-3-3-1, but sometimes you get teams that use something a little fancier.
Well, I'd love to see more. I'd love to see more like American players like popping up like as like big name players in rugby. Like obviously, I think in the Premiership we got like AJ McGinty for sale. Who else is there, Mackie?
Well, there's been Chris Wells has been a legend of the US game.
I think you have is it Lolosio? I think he played for Quins. He's just like a bowling ball center. It doesn't have the same skills. At least he doesn't use them. He just kind of runs through people.
Yeah.
Awesome.
I've got one more question. Like, what do you think needs to happen for the game to really take off in the US? Like, obviously, we're seeing like games like there was the Ireland versus New Zealand game in the US, and clearly there's a lot of investment there. But what do you think needs to happen for it to get to that point where it is a big sport?
I think it'll either grow organically, just the way it is, and it's going to take time. And whether they ever get to the point of competing with big nations. I mean, Italy's not competing against a lot of those big nations, and they've had a great team as far as like compared to the rest of the world. Or which is likely, is that somebody who's really rich will invest time and money, and you'll see the US take off very quickly. I think a big thing, if for college, if alumni that have a lot of money start investing, and then these big state schools can start offering money, the speed at which the game will grow, that'll change everything.
If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to like and subscribe on YouTube, follow on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, as well as follow our Instagram @MuchAdoUboutRugby.